Hey there, and welcome to Whimsical Wreath Demonstration Redo. I tried to do this demonstration on Friday in the Watercolor with Viv group, but Facebook kept booting my video and my broadcast off. I don't know why, so at first I thought it was me, but it was actually Facebook. So I decided to do this little video just to show you how to do each of the elements so you can do it on your own. Now this is what I had completed while I was on Facebook. Actually, I don't think all of my viewers saw it because Facebook booted me off, but that was what we completed. So now I'm going to show you the elements again. Since they didn't get broadcast, we're going to start at the top, and we're going to start with some green gold, sap green, and perylene green, and I'm going to show you how to do the little pine boughs, the little pine branches. I call them pine boughs. You can call them pine branches. I don't care what you call them, but we're going to do them. So I'm going to take a little perylene green, and I'm just going to draw or paint. I say draw all the time, but we're going to paint the spines in first. That's going to give us the structure for our pine sprig. I'm just going to call it anything that comes to my mind. Y'all know what I'm talking about. Just going to draw that in. That's going to give us our foundation. That's what we're going to work off of. We want it to be fairly dark. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to get some of the sap green and green gold, kind of mix it together a little bit. And then we're just going to draw little lines or paint little lines. And we're going to be thinking about the shape of a pine bough, a pine branch as we do it, and how it comes out at the end like a little fan, and then each side, the pine needles go down each side pretty uniformly. It doesn't have to be perfect. There's no perfect in nature. So you just want it to look organic and beautiful. When I get down here to the berries, I'm going to go over, across the berries to the top, but I'm not going to actually paint over the berries because I want the berries to look like they're in front of the pine bough. So I just painted around those. And I'm going to go down each little branch, each little spine or midrib, whatever you want to call it, and just put in those little tick marks, those just straight little lines to mimic the pine needles. And I'm also varying the color as I'm going down. I'm getting a little bit more dark in there sometimes, a little more of the green gold. It's up to you. It's your pine branch. You do it the way that feels comfortable and looks natural to you. It's okay if they get overlapped. That's what pine branches do. They overlap each other. So don't get all fussy about it and don't worry about it. So now I'm going to work on one of these berries and show you how we do that. You're going to cover it with clear water. Remember to try to leave your part of your paper blank and unwet. I didn't do it for this berry, but it's okay because this little berry is behind that front berry, so it might not have a bright highlight. Then I'm taking Winsor red. I put clear water, and I put some Naples yellow, and now I'm coming back in with the Winsor red, and I'm just using the tip of my brush to blend that all around. There's my Winsor red. I'm going to put it where I really want the shadow, where I want it the darkest. That's where I'm dropping it in a little bit darker. And just creating a shadow right underneath that, behind that berry that's behind the front berry. I'm just going to clean up the edges. It looks a little bumpy. It's got some bumps on it, so just cleaning up the edges there. So the next thing I'm going to work on while that dries is the little bird at the top. He's just now beginning to fly and just light onto the wreath, so we're going to paint him. We're going to wet his back. We're going to take a little bit of the Winsor red, a little bit of the Naples yellow, and make kind of a peachy color. And we're just going to drop that down into that clear water that we put on his back. And just spread it around with the tip of the brush. It doesn't have to be perfect. Then I'm just going to take a little darker mixture and go right around the edges for some definition and some shadow. And leave that right around the edges. We're going to let that dry. And then we're going to wet his little cap up here, the little top of his head, and get a nice clear coat of water on there. Now I don't want it want it beaded up. It just needs to be a smooth coat. Then I'm taking a little bit of ultramarine blue mixture. That is ultramarine blue with a little bit of the Winsor red with a touch of yellow, and you get this beautiful gray. So let me repeat that because I showed it in the first bird, but since that didn't get captured on film, I'll repeat it again. Winsor blue, the Naples yellow, and Winsor red, not Winsor blue, ultramarine blue, Winsor red, and Naples yellow all mixed together to make a nice green. And then I'm just going to come around to his wing and paint that on there as well, because we want the inside of his wing to be this nice rich gray color. I'm just adding a little bit of water because my paint was a little dry there. I didn't have enough water, so now I've got a nice watery mixture of the gray. It's okay if it's not even, because we're going to come back with, after this dries, with some more layers to define it. Don't get panicky. Just get the gray, slap it on there. It'll be okay. As long as you get a nice even coat or wash of gray on there. And then we're going to come back in and fiddle with it some to get it to our liking, to make it look like little feathers and stuff. And I'm just blending it with the tip while it's still wet, the tip of my brush, blending it out. You notice I've put a little bit more of the dark gray where I want it to be more shadowed. We're going to let that dry, then we'll come down here to the tail, just do the same thing, just get a nice wash of gray right on his little tail. And remember, his tail is kind of forked, so leave a little white space in between those two just to give it that illusion of having a forked tail. I'm taking a little bit of Perylene Green and I'm mixing a little bit of ultramarine blue in there. I'm trying to get a nice dark color. And I'm going to pick up a little bit of the Winsor red. And a little bit more of the ultramarine blue just to make it a nice dark gray. And we're going to paint his little bitty eyeball. The paper is dry. We didn't wet it first because we want control. We don't want the paint to flow. We want it to stay exactly where we put it. Painted his eye and left a little white highlight. We just left part of the paper without any paint on it. Doing the same thing with his beak. We're just leaving a little tiny white highlight, painting directly onto dry paper. And the paint is about the consistency of milk. So you see this little bird down here, he's finished, really cute, but I want to do a little tiny detail on his cheek, and he's completely dry. You have to wait for him to be completely dry. And I'm just doing a little line, little dotted curved line from the back of his eye to his beak, and I'm just putting another layer on the bottom of his beak to darken it up so that it does look like the bottom of his beak. These are stylized birds. We're not trying to go super realistic. We're going for cuteness. Cuteness above all else. So we're not worried about all the fine details in this painting. Now I'm just taking some water, clean water, going right around the edge of his breast and his abdomen down here to his bottom, up by his beak, and we're going to take Naples yellow and we're just going to drop it into that water and let it start to spread out. That's going to be the shadow part of his breast and underneath his tummy, right to his tail. Then I'm just going to take clear water and blend that out with my brush. Just clean your brush and then dip it in water and begin to just spread that out. I'm adding a little bit more Naples yellow up here by his eyeball. I'm being careful not to touch his actual eyeball because it's still a little damp, so I'm leaving a tiny white ring around it so that it doesn't bleed. And I'm also just adding more Naples yellow where I want a shadow to be. I'm just taking my brush, dipping it in the Naples yellow wash that I have, and it's about the thickness of cream, and then dropping it into that wet wash where I want the shadows to be. And I'm just doing a few little feathery lines right under his wing in the white spots just to be for a shadow, a type of shadow. So there we've got him going. He's looking good. We're going to let that dry completely. Remember, every time you put another layer of something, try to let it dry completely. Now we're going to start with our gray wash and start defining this wing. And I've just put right on dry paper, I put a line, a little curvy line of the gray, and then took a wet brush and blended it out. Now I'm taking the gray and creating the lines between the feathers so that we get a little separation with his little feathers. We want them to be separated. We don't want him to have blobby feathers. We want him to have some individual feathers up there, flight feathers. And I'm just adding a little bit more gray right here and just taking my brush and kind of blending it so that it'll look like a shadow. Oh, excuse me. I am so sorry. Now I'm going to do the same thing with the tail. I'm just going to put in some shadows, and then I'm going to just take my brush and wash it, and then just kind of, with just clear water, spread that out some. And I'm adding a few more shadows, a little bit more of the gray mixture right behind his head where I want the shadow, because that wing is up there, and so his little head is going to have a shadow behind it, and a little shadow in the front of his face because the light is hitting more of the center of his head, his little round head. He's such a cute little bird. And he's just singing because he's so happy it's Christmas. And she's down here looking up at him, thinking he's lost his mind, all that singing. So I'm going to go ahead and show you a few more berries so that you'll get the hang of it. Again, clear water. We're leaving part of the paper completely dry. That's going to be our highlight. And then we're dropping a wet wash of Naples yellow, about the consistency of milk, and then scarlet pyrrole next. And at the very edges where we want it really dark, we're dropping in the Winsor red, and we're letting that water just do the work for us, just mixing it all up. I'm going to do another one. I'll show you how to do that. Dropping in the Naples yellow. We've left a spot completely dry. That will be the highlight of our little berry. We're getting that Naples yellow into that wet wash. Now we're coming back with a little bit of scarlet pyrrole, which is an orangey red. It's a really warm red, almost to the orange side. And then we're dropping in a Winsor red, which is actually more of a bluish red. Has more blue tones to it. Right where we want the shadows to be of the berries, where the berries are overlapping, where one berry or a leaf might be shading it. Think about those things when you're painting. Where are the shadows going to be in life? Even though this is a whimsical, not really realistic and highly stylized, you still want to give the illusion of form and shape. And the only way to give the illusion of form and shape is through shadowing, highlights. That's what makes something flat look three-dimensional, is through the shadowing of it, the highlights, things like that. So you want to pay attention to where the shadows might be in real life if this were a real bird, and try to go with that. It doesn't have to be perfect since it's stylized, as long as you get the idea. And we're really just going for cuteness, like I said, but even cuteness needs to have its shadows in the right spot. And I'm just darkening up this that's already dry, so I'm putting a little bit more of that same mixture, just glazing it over there. It's completely dry. That'll give a shadow to the beak. And like I said, we all about some lights and shadows in our painting, because that's really what gives it its dynamic look and its realistic look. We're going to go ahead and put the little tiny detail around his little cheeks with these little dark gray highlights or dots. It's the same exact mixture that I used for the beak, which was Pearlin green, ultramarine blue, and Winsor red. Now I'm just going to come in here with a really fine brush. It's a number 2 brush, number 2 pointed round, and separate his feathers a little bit more. Almost said leaves, because that's what I say all the time. I got leaves on the brain. If I'm painting flowers, I call them leaves. If I'm painting wings, I call them leaves. But just know that those are his wings and those are feathers. Okay, he's looking really cute. I'm liking my little bird. So now I'm going to show you how to do a holly leaf again. Let's put it up here where you can see it. Just a nice wash of clean water over the whole leaf. We don't want it soaking wet. We just want a wash of water and let it seep into the page just a little bit. We don't want any bubbles of water or anything like that. I'm just going to take some green gold, and where I think that the light will be hitting the leaf the most, that's where I'm going to drop in some of this gold green or green gold. I'm going to take the sap green where it's getting a little bit darker. It's curving around away from the light source, so it's going to be a little bit darker in this area. Then I'm going to take the perylene green where I think there will be a shadow and drop that in to that area. And I'm letting the water let those mix and mingle on their own, taking my brush and just kind of pulling around the edges so they'll blend a little bit, adding a little bit more of the sap green here just to brighten it up some. And then I'm just taking my brush, the tip of my brush, and blending those edges a little bit. And we're going to let that dry completely. Now we're going to start on another one. I'm going to show you how to do another one. I'm just trying to show you how to do a little bit of each thing, the bird, the berries, and the holly leaves, so that you can repeat it on your own drawing. That way, if you want to draw something or paint something with holly leaves, you'll be able to do it. If you want to add some berries, I've shown you how to do that. If you want to put a cute little bird, I've shown you how to do that. So you've got a good mix of techniques of everything. Just like the big leaf, the same with the little leaf. I've put water, green gold, and then some of the darker colors in. So now for one of the last things, I'm going to show you how to do another pine bough. So we'll get our structure in there first with the perylene green. And then we're going to go ahead with the sap green, a little bit of green gold mixed in. We're going to make our pine needles right along the edge of that spine. We're going to be thinking about how a pine bough is shaped and how it looks. If you want to, go outside and get one if you have pine trees nearby, or a way of getting it. Or you can look on the internet and find your own reference photo just to look at to see how the leaves, or I guess they're called needles, how the little needles attach and the shape that they're in around that spine. But just be thinking about that as you do it. Remember, you can add a little bit lighter, a little bit darker greens in there to give it some variation, give it some dimension, make it look a little bit more realistic, because you want to convince the viewer's eye that this is a little pine sprig. I'm going around those berries. I'm not painting all the way through them. I'm going up to one side and then over to the other side. As you see, I'm leaving those berries unpainted. I don't want to have green lines through them. So there is the little bird, and I've shown you how to do each one of the elements. Hopefully you've gotten a lot of value from this. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below where you're watching this video, and I will get to it as soon as I can. Now I'm just adding just one last detail is once they were dry, I just added a little bit of veins to the holly leaves with the perylene green. So there is the complete finished product. Thank you for watching, and come back next Friday for another live demo.